Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Today on the Focus on Why podcast, I'm joined by Matt Baker. Matt, welcome.
Hello, Amy. Thank you for having me.
And why are you here, Matt?
That's a very good question. Well, you asked me very nicely. that's, I'm here because I've been intrigued by the podcast so far and what in getting to the bottom of why people do things. And yeah, I've been focusing quite a lot on why I do what I do, and especially with what's going on in my personal life right now. There's a huge change coming, which we'll get to shortly, and I feel like I'm starting to get some clarity on it. So I thought it would be great to come on and share that, and share how I feel and believe that my why is shaping up.
It's really interesting because I've known you for 4 years now. And I think what I've noticed is you've always had this strong drive to do what you do.
Yep.
And it's been very clear from the outset that you knew what you needed to do and who you needed to work with. But there was never this sort of this absolute, as you just said, clarity of why you were doing what you were doing. So now you understood how you're going to do it. You mastered that quite quickly and started delivering property to communities very quickly. It was just a case of, I guess, this light bulb has gone off. What changed?
So one of the big things that hit was obviously the COVID outbreak, and that forced a bit of thought and reflection. And just before COVID, I had read a book called KPI, or Key Person of Influence, by Daniel Priestley, who you may or may not know. I've got that book here, and that I read it for the first time probably about 5 years ago when I first got into property. It's one of those books that people said, "Oh, you should read this one." So it went onto the list, and I went through it, and I actually listened to it at the time. I never owned the book until recently, and then I listened to it again towards the beginning of this year, and as part of that book, there's a quiz you can do. So I went online, did the quiz, and kind of got a sense of how the business was. And I was like, well, that's not how I really want it to be, and then was invited to do a strategy session with Daniel Priestley, and then I thought, well, actually, he's talks a lot of sense. Let's see how I can work further with him. So I'm now working with them on their KPI, Key Person of Influence Business Accelerator, and that's given me so much. Well, it's forced me to think and look at what we do, and off the back of that, has given me quite a lot of clarity on our business, what the mission is, and essentially why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Because you've always had the passion and you've always had the sort of the profession. You knew what you wanted to do, but it was just that mission, getting that bit absolutely spot on that he's helping you with.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And even from when I first started in property, like that's one of the first questions that was asked when I did the first property training course I did. Is why do you want to do this? And it's not a question I could answer. I had this idea of what it's going to be for the family or the future family, and because that was quite abstract, very hard to pin down exactly what the reasons were. So actually, looking back in my previous life, from a very early age, like what are the common themes going through my life? What is it that drives me? I think I really started to pull the essence of that together, and fundamentally, it is for family, because that's always been a huge part of my life. I've had a great relationship with my parents, grandparents, and aunts and uncles. We're as a family, we're relatively close. So wanting to have financial security um, and build a business which I can be proud of and leave to my kids in the future.
And something that you mentioned your previous life. I mean, obviously you didn't mean like literally a previous life, but your your former years. How much have they shaped the way that you're working now?
So when I was younger, I I've always been into music. Music has been the common thread throughout my life until I hit property. And when I hit property, I thought to myself, I should be doing this. Well, I thought I was doing to make money to be able to do music. And but actually, to put it another way, I always thought in my 20s I was going to be a successful musician, go out there and make my money in the music industry, and then invest it into other assets. So I knew property was a great thing to be in. But then when I hit 30, I suddenly realised through the input of others that it's going to be the other way around. So that shift was that I was going to make my money and my wealth through property investing and through helping others in their property investing, and then I can invest the profits and that into creating a musical legacy. Because essentially, I'm not really that fussed about houses. I'm more fussed about the intellectual property, the what you can create, which actually has meaning. So leaving a musical legacy behind of creating musical works and songs, etc. That has more meaning to me than going and buying a flat and renting it out. So interestingly enough, yeah. So doing that simple property investing, going buying flats, renting them out, doesn't interest me as much either, because there's actually a lot more to it, and that goes back to my childhood as well. Because as a musician, was a I'm a piano player, and it's a very solitary instrument. So it's always something that I would play, and I I really enjoyed it when I started, and I got to about I think it was grade 2 or 3, and my parents my parents went to the music teachers like parents' evening, and my piano teacher sat them down and said, I'm a bit concerned about Matthew and his upcoming exam next week. We don't think he's going to pass. To which my parents said, "What exam?" And so I hadn't told my parents about it. Managed to get it entered for an exam and not really practice, not tell my parents. And at that point, my dad stood next to me for like all hours of the day so that I could practice. And I passed that exam with the skin of my teeth. And then we had a look at why I was playing the piano, and we changed the tack from doing the grades. I still did the grades, and the deal was I would continue to do grades, but also I could have lots of fun. And we started learning jazz, and that's where I started to develop a love of jazz music and became a jazz musician through that. So I learned my technique through doing grades, and then obviously learned to do the fun stuff. But being a piano player is very lonely. And I didn't really come into my own as a musician until I started working with others. It was about when I think it was 14 or 15, and one of my best friends at school was a pianist and a bass player, and we got together, and it was his mum and dad's 25th wedding anniversary, and we did a gig with a band that was called, what we called at the time. I can't remember the exact name of the band, but I think we might have been called the Dirty Shirts after that gig. Anyway, so at one point we were called the Dirty Shirts. And we went out and we started gigging, doing weddings and parties for friends and family and friends of the family. So we started doing gigs. We got paid, and playing in a band was really exciting for me. It meant that we could create harmony, and it was much more rewarding than just sitting by the piano and playing by myself. I didn't enjoy that in the same way as working with others, and that theme kind of followed through my life. When going to university, I was always creating bands, working with other musicians, and then after university, so I studied music and technology at uni at Edinburgh, and then when I moved to London after uni, I did a bit of traveling after uni, but then after that moved to London. Started working as a session musician with a day job to pay the bills, and worked as a session musician at night and the weekends. And it was all about working with original artists, creating music, and all about that end result, that end band being tight, being well thought through. I don't like, as a jazz musician, I don't like going and jamming down the pub. I much prefer to have a well thought through piece of music which has been well crafted, with the opportunity to showcase the musicianship of the individuals as well within that. But I find it amazing that to have that end result, so that sense of community. So that when I hit 30 and started going into property, and that the HMO route really rang true to me, because it was about creating harmony within houses and people that love to live where they are. So and be able to create that space where tenants love to live is one of my big passions, and will continue to be forever, I believe. So that sense of community really came through from an early age, and now through to designing what we do, which is essentially co-living, community living. But also as a business, I've always tried to monetize the music industry. I've always tried to get more out of it. So when we did gigs, I remember when we used to do gigs and we get paid 50 quid, 100 quid each. And I was like, we're rolling in it. It's the age of 16. And it was amazing. Like, people paying us to go and play at their weddings. I look back at it now and thinking, why would they pay us? We weren't that good. We were all right. We weren't that good. But we're a very cost-effective solution for them, knowing how much I would charge to go and do a wedding now as a musician, as a band. It was a very cost-effective way for someone to have a live band at their wedding. So I've always tried to grow a business. So going through university again, doing gigs, paid gigs afterwards, and trying to make the most out of what we did. And very quickly realised that was going to be a very hard thing in the music industry to do, to have an ongoing income. And it was when I was working in a band, probably in my late 20s. I was working with a band, and the guitarist was in his early 40s, and he was still working in a restaurant, to pay the rent. And I thought, well, I don't really want to be that person. I don't, and that's that's highly likely for the majority of musicians. They get by, and it's quite massively skewed towards towards those that make it, and those that don't. And it's hugely unfair, because those that make it aren't necessarily the most talented. But that's the same in any industry. In business, it's not the cleverest person that's the most successful. That again came to fruition really when I realized that gigging wasn't going to be the thing. I became a teacher, so I taught piano, and I got very successful at that. People started recommending me to their other parents. Loved me, they'd recommend me to other parents, and then I got very full very quickly, and as Daniel Priestley would say, become oversubscribed, and then started to take on other teachers to teach my waiting list. And that became a music school, and that was my first successful business, and I sold that a couple of years ago. And it's still going in South Oxfordshire from the person that bought it, which is great to see that I've started something which is actually growing. And even though I've handed that mantle over to somebody else, I'm very proud to see that there is a stamp of a legacy somewhere in the world from pre-property days. So I suppose in summary, that brings the two things that I'm really passionate about, which is the sense of creating a great business, and that sense of creating a great community, which has been in music up till I was 30, and now in property. And within what we do now, you bring those two things together, and actually that's where the magic happens. That's where I'm really passionate. That's what I love to do. I love to talk about it. If you go onto any of my social media stuff, it's all about co-living, shared living, great accommodation, tenants loving what they do. In fact, we've come into the idea we just don't like the word tenant. We think it's like the word HMO. We don't like the word HMO. We don't like the word tenant. They have connotations with too many bad things. So actually, we're changing the way we talk about things as well. So we talk about co-living spaces, rooms, housemates, homes, rather than HMOs. And instead of tenants, we talk about, again, housemates, members of a community. So instead of someone becoming a tenant, they become a member of a household, which is going to embrace them and want them to be part of that community. So that's what I'm really passionate about. A long-winded way to get to that answer of the question.
Well, when there's passion involved, it doesn't tend to be a quick answer. There's a lot to it, and there has some depth to it. And what I was sort of chuckled to myself a little bit was when you said you hit property several times actually, and it's almost like, oh, I hit property in my 30s. It sounds a bit like you go through a stage like puberty, and it's like, yeah, I got to the property stage in my 30s. It was brilliant. But for me, I just want to sort of talk about the community and why community is so important to you.
Because I'm a big believer that the sum is greater than the individual parts. So when someone is working solo, obviously they can get quite a lot done. You get your head down, you get into something. But if you're working with other people, you can actually do a lot more because you are only one opinion. You've only got one set of eyes, and it doesn't matter whether you're the most visionary person out there or the most analytical person out there. It doesn't matter what your personality is. You have one part of the puzzle. You don't have the whole solution. And even the most successful people out there, the entrepreneurs that are changing the world, they would very openly say, I don't do this by myself. I have not created this success by myself. I may have had an idea, but there's absolutely no way that I could have implemented that without all these other people that are doing amazing things. You don't know them by name, but they are probably more important. Well, they're just as important in this business as the Richard Bransons of the world.
So do you feel that the last couple of months of finding your clarity has actually made life simpler for you?
Yeah, it definitely has actually. And I think when COVID hits, there's um, in the pandemic, the first reaction is that fear reaction of, oh, what's going on? I don't know what's happening. And you kind of go inside yourself and quite insular. And there was definitely a week where I was like, I don't know how, what's going to happen, and I was very fearful. And I kind of reverted back to some old bad habits, which I worked hard to get out of. So I feel that when and well, at that time as well, I was very concerned about money, whether it was going to come in, and something which I I'm aware of is that when you focus just on your own personal income, your own personal income expenditure, you're only ever going to have that tight. You're not going to have that huge wealth that you want because you're only focused on the minutiae. So actually, one thing that I had to force myself to do was to think about the bigger picture and the bigger why. And actually, what that did was took my focus away from the fact of paying the bills, and actually again focused on the wider world. Because if you do that and focus on your mission, then actually all of that stuff will just take care of itself. And I've started to see that happen. And after that first week and a half of being quite fearful, started putting energy towards creating that why and just writing it down. So we've now got, what our business stands for. Our core values is written down on a piece of paper. It's printed off. It's been sent out to all the team that we work with. Everyone's come back with some amazing feedback on it, and it feels like it's us. It feels very true to what we do, and I've got a very clear sense of our mission, to create a positive impact on HMO and co-living communities across the UK, to create lifelong peace of mind for both landlord and tenant. So being having that goal in mind, just knowing what we're doing and what we're changing, has just started massively different conversations with people, and people are starting to contact me about our vision for the future and for the future of this co-living, shared living environment, which is going to be a growing market despite the self-isolation, despite everything that's happened in the last couple of months. I think we're going to see a massive revolution in HMOs. I use that term, but they are going to evolve, and the old way of doing HMOs is not going to cut mustard anymore.
So interesting that your values, your personal values, are highly reflected in your business values. I mean, not interesting, but I mean, it makes sense, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And like in terms of the core values, it was, and just simplifying it, just getting it down there, just brainstorming words that we like, and putting it into short sentences. And the core values, we've got a document which is internal document which we wouldn't put out to the wider world, and we've got the kind of summary which will be going on our websites, etc. but it is about the community, about building community, being the best version of yourself, and just I think about looking to grow rather than shrink as a business and as individuals within a business.
And a couple of words I'm picking up on a lot is building and creating important to you.
Oh, massively. When I was a musician, I the the creation of money as a session musician um, generally seems to be around playing music, which, so for example, doing wedding gigs or doing functions, parties. So you're playing other people's music and the music which is playing on the radio, and that can be fun for a little while, but there's only so many times that you want to go out there and play, a Stevie Wonder track, because it's just not quite the same. Even though and it taints the music you absolutely love. Yeah, so I remember we used to play Superstition all the time in wedding bands and function bands, and I felt like that song lost its essence the more we played it, because it's just not the same as the original. And I hadn't heard the original for quite a long time, because I'm so sick of that song. I play it so many, people always ask for it. It's a standard one. It's a straightforward one for the band to know. We played it so many times, and I listened to the original, and I just, you just fall in love with the song again, because actually this is such an amazing piece of music, amazing piece of art, that so playing someone else's music, as much as I loved that, it it lost it kind of lost its way. So when I made a conscious decision not to do function gigs, and kind of later on in my 20s, I just said, well, I'm not going to do that, because I ended up just doing it for the money. And when I'm doing music, I only want to work with people who are creating their own music, where I can have an impact on that. So I can bring my skills to the party, and I can help them to people who maybe aren't pianists, who have an idea of what they want something to be on the piano, and I can make that into what's in their head, for example. And that's always worked really well, and that's what I still do now in terms of music. I work with a band. They're called Lo Keba. It's an Afro-Cuban inspired world music band. We are a small group, and then the band of core musicians, and then when we come together, the band is much larger. And I've always had a love of Afro-Cuban music, soul, jazz, Latin, funk, all that kind of stuff. It is my core music. Absolutely love rock. I've played in rock bands for years. If you go back in time on social media, you'll see me playing for bands like the Mars Patrol. We played festivals and all sorts of stuff. It was so much fun. And I've come back to what I loved before, which is playing jazz and Latin American music. So yeah, this band that we're working on at the moment, I'm currently recording. It's what was the question?
That's a good point. It doesn't matter. It's all about what I'm hearing is all about what you're able to create with other people. It's not being solitary anymore. It's having those people in all aspects of your life, at home, in work, in your passion, in your music. Just making sure you're collaborating with others.
Yeah, I think that's where I really have where I really come into my own, and what I really love doing. And I realized this early on in music as well. It is connecting people. So I have a conversation with someone, going, actually, I know this person who's really good at that, and bringing people together. So as a band leader, that would be obviously bringing the musicians together, and then I would pass the musicians on to other people. So this person would be great for what you're doing, this project, etc. So connecting people is always something I've been quite passionate about. And again, if I think about it, that's still what I'm doing, connecting with people.
I was going to say, and creating a legacy in the process.
Well, that's the plan, is to connect with people and create great, something which to be proud of. And conversations I had with property developers that maybe don't do co-living and HMOs, they do other types of property. They maybe do new build property. So we don't do new build, we generally convert. But on a new build property, you can build a new build property either to last 25 years or to last 250 years. And I think there's too many people out there maybe not building to a high enough standard to have these buildings which you'd be proud of, for your kids. Say that you walk past a property and that you've developed, and you go, yeah, I built that. Yes, I'm proud of that. And you just walk around and you see the types of properties that were built 100 years ago, and you see the types of properties that were built 50 years ago, and like the ones that were built 50 years ago are being torn down and rebuilt. The ones that are built 100, 200 years ago, they're still standing. So I think there's a big thing, I think big responsibility for us as developers of property is to leave a legacy, to leave quality, and especially at the moment is to create something which is sustainable as well. So one of the things that where I started with Daniel Priestley, we talked about choosing some global goals, and so the UN has got 17 global goals for sustainability, and it was quite hard to choose the two that we wanted, but I'm very now set on the two that we have. So we represent, and we're looking to make changes in goal 8 and 11, which are sustainable cities, and then building communities. Sorry, business. So sustainable cities and communities, and then building
Decent work and economic growth.
decent work and economic growth. Exactly. So I think within that building of a legacy, if those buildings are more environmentally friendly, they're more economical to run, it has a knock-on impact for the environment, but also a knock-on impact for the business. Your business will become a lot more profitable. And we hold properties, we buy them, we renovate them, and we put a group of people in there, and we pay all the bills. So we want to be able to have some control over that. We want to be able to minimize what that cost is going to be. So I'm very keen to explore getting solar panels, air source heat pumps, getting the best sustainable options for heating and operating shared living. And those are conversations that I'm starting to have now, and something that I believe will be a massive thing for us and for those that we work with their properties, because it just seems a no-brainer to me.
And what type of work or what type of people are you keen to help in the process?
So essentially, I haven't really said who we are or what we do, but I am the co-founder of two businesses, one which is a developer called Scott Baker Properties, and I work with my business partner, Niall Scott, to buy properties, we buy houses, commercial buildings, and we convert them into what essentially becomes shared living, and the best quality shared living. We also do some social housing schemes and supported living schemes within that business as well. So we work with those that have the funds to afford this really nice co-living. But then we also work with councils and charities that provide accommodation for those that need it probably more. So that's on the development side. On the training side, we actually help others to develop the same. So we've really niched down on what it is we create. We create next level HMOs. We create the next wave. So in the next 10 years, we're going to be creating these co-living spaces and next level HMOs. And we can't do it alone. We can't have that positive impact on HMO and co-living communities without the help of others. So we have a method that we use, and we help people that are in a position to act on that. So generally those people are people who are landlords who are looking to grow their businesses into this HMO co-living sector. People that maybe have been in HMOs for the last 10 years and suddenly started to see it not working for them. Then there's an evolution that can happen with a business like that. And then there's also when you take a landlord who's maybe starting now, maybe been a landlord for a year or two, and sees the potential in this HMO and co-living community, then we say, well, these are the steps that you need to go through, the things that you need to be aware of as you're doing it, and then we just project manage that outcome to make sure that the choices they make are the best ones. Quite a lot of our clients have the capital to invest in these types of projects. And even where we started with nothing, we use investment finance using investors to grow our development business. But actually, we know that to have an impact, you need a combination of investment, but also those people who've got the clout to go and make a big impact on this industry.
And you mentioned working with charities. What are you hoping to achieve there, and who are you working with?
So at the moment, I can't say too much about it as we're just going through the motions with a couple of providers. But what our strategy is to identify the need. So we reach out to a care provider and a housing association. We identify the need that they have, and essentially we buy to order. So they say we have a need for 10 properties to house these 10 individuals that have these very, very complex needs. And so what we can do is go out, find the properties, and then renovate them to the exact specification to meet those needs. And either we can hold them ourselves, and the housing association will pay the rent to us, or we can then sell them on to maybe an institutional investor or a trust or a fund or a pension that would hold those assets for the turnover. So that's essentially what we're doing at the moment, and we're also so chatting to care providers and homeless charities as well. Especially at the moment, with after COVID, we've got a resettlement of homeless people who've just been taken into hotels, and we've got homeless charities that have been working with them and councils that have been working with them to change the way that and they are to kind of make sure that homelessness is now not the norm, because it takes at least 21 days to form a new habit. So if we can take someone off the street for what we're up to now, like 70 days, they're now in a new habit of living inside. So we don't want to put them back outside. There's lots of need now for accommodation, onward accommodation for those that have been homeless, that have been worked with over the last couple of months, to get them back into, I suppose, society.
I think that's something that you've mentioned to me before about helping the individuals and helping them back on their feet directly, as opposed to sort of funding through charities. You want to actually really be there. And how do you help people to get on their own feet?
So I'm a big believer that that sustainable solutions are much better than just donating money to charity. I think donating money to charity, is a good thing, and can help temporarily, but you constantly have to re-raise that money constantly to keep that solution going. Whereas if we can create more sustainable solutions to these problems, then you then solve the problem. Whereas charity, I don't necessarily think solves the problem, because if your goal is to constantly ask people for money to and yeah, so essentially I would much prefer to invest money, even if it's a donation, into a business. It's a social enterprise. So, for example, one thing that our group, the KPI Accelerator, we help to fund a beekeeper in a developing country, so they could grow their business. So, as a beekeeper, that's going to help grow their business. It's going to help their family. It's going to help their local community, local economy, but also it's going to help the environment. So it has three knock-on effects by just making a small investment into that business. So it's like a micro loan, or even just an investment. So that is a much better way of investing in sustainable solutions, rather than just thinking about charity for charity's sake. So when it comes to the housing and housing people, like homelessness, I there's it's a big problem with housing in the UK generally, but that there must be a sustainable way of being able to house the homeless, and so we can get people off the streets really quickly, or prevent them from going onto the streets. And at Scott Baker Properties, our passion more is about preventing homelessness, rather than trying to solve it once someone is homeless, because it's the prevention is better than the cure. That's my belief. So, for example, we do work with charities like the Clock Tower Sanctuary in Brighton, who help young people to get back on their feet. So we run Brighton Property Meet every month. Was in a pub in Brighton, currently on Zoom. But when we go back to the pub, so for that we do raise money to help those guys at Brighton Clock Tower Sanctuary to rehabilitate young people from the age of 16 to 25 or 18 to 25 to get back on their feet. And that hits our target of trying to prevent homelessness. And then, granted, that is a donation, but that donation to that to that particular charity helps to prevent the problem. So prevention is better than the cure. And then the next step for that would then be to look to find ways to house these people and find temporary accommodation for them whilst they're getting back on their feet. So to actually stop them getting onto the streets. So that's something we're passionate about, and it's something which is difficult to do. And as I said earlier, I have ideas about that. I was trying to create new ideas, but obviously being too busy to enact them all at once. So one thing at a time. I'm a bit scattergun. So I actually reminding myself to go one thing at a time.
Yeah, it's really hard to sort of pick one particular cause in life, and trying to pick one of the 17 goals of the global goals. I found that a very difficult task as well when I'm working with Daniel Priestley. So coming right back down to your immediate community, tell us a bit more about what's happening there.
I presume you're referring to my impending fatherhood there. um, so I am expecting my first child in towards the end of June. So I'm not sure when this episode will be going out.
Congratulations, you're a father.
Well, thank you. Yes, I could well be a father by then. But I could be a father tomorrow and everything would be fine. So so I'm expecting my first child. And as I said earlier in the podcast, this when I first got into property, it was about this future family, about that abstract a feeling of wanting a family but not knowing what it's going to be about, and not feeling that why, so not being connected to it in the same way as I'm connected to my my sister, my parents, etc. So my nephews. So up till now, then like everything was for my nephews. It was about the future generation, but obviously now it's for obviously still working, well, helping them, but working with helping my daughter. Yes, he's coming very, very soon.
That's very exciting times, Matt.
I'm petrified. I'm very excited as well, but I'm very petrified. And I think it's anyone who's thinks back to when they had their first child, as the guy, it's hard to pinpoint the what it's going to be like. I think so Lara's had 8 months now to get used to being get used to being a mum. Things are changing for her, whereas nothing's changed for me really. And I know for a fact it's going to be an overnight change. So we can do all the preparation, we can do all the reading, we can listen to podcasts and all about it. And I've got my book on the side of my bed about being the best dad, my guidebook, so I can just refer to that. I was like, how do I change a nappy? Oh, here it is. How do I do this? Change it. So it's a great book that Lara bought me. So yeah, I'm excited but petrified.
Oh, and I think that's the right frame of mind to come at it. I mean, nobody can actually really truly prepare you for becoming a parent and a mother or a father, because it doesn't matter what people say. When that baby arrives, it's just a whole different feeling, and you don't know what that feeling is going to be until it happens, and then you'll get it, you'll understand, and you'll know. So yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, so I know we've talked a lot about business and community, but realistically, that's the why. It's the legacy. So it's for her and any more kids that we have, to ensure that they can be proud of their dad, and that they can look at what we do and go, yes, this is something that we're proud of. It's something that I'm happy to take on, potentially take on, or not, and just live an amazing life of choice, so that they have the choices of what they want to do. Yeah.
So 2020 is an interesting year for you. You finally read a book that had been on your list for a long time, and yet where that's now taken you, you wouldn't have known, and you probably weren't ready, to be fair. I'm a great believer of, you pick the book up when it's supposed to be right, time for you, and you get frustrated because you wish you'd sort of done that test sooner and met Daniel Priestley sooner and come to these decisions sooner. But actually, was it the right time before? Probably not.
No, I think a lot of things come together to form a change of path, and I'm a believer that the the pandemic, as horrific as it has been for some people, has actually probably helped more people than it's harmed in a lot of ways. In the way that it's forced people to stop and think. And yes, there's probably going to be some negatives, and the longer the lockdown is, then obviously that there are quite a lot of economic problems, social problems that come with that. Just getting people out and working and to a sense of normality. But I just believe that we are going to have a completely new outlook on things. I don't think it's not going to go back to business as usual. But yeah, all these things have come together to really change things, because 2020 is going to be a completely different year to what I thought it was going to be. In January, I had a plan of what we were going to do, what we were going to achieve, and we were like kind of head down, get on with it. And it was working okay, but it wasn't working great. And then all these things are kind of aligned, and actually it's like, well, I've just suddenly gone on a different path, and life's got a little bit easier, which is probably a good thing with a baby on the way. And I feel like there's a reason. So I've been getting up thinking, I know what I'm doing today. I'm happy about that. And I'm the busiest I've ever been throughout lockdown. I'm having the most conversations I've ever had, very meaningful conversations as well. And especially around co-living. And I've started to network with some amazing people who've got some amazing ideas about what shared living can be and should be. I'm really looking forward to taking that conversation further over the next few years, essentially making sure that the rest of that everyone else knows about it and knows that actually this is something which needs to happen.
Well, I really look forward to following your progress and seeing what you create and build going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. Me too.
So, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been absolutely fantastic to hear all about your whys, your several whys, and welcome to the world, little Miss Baker, very soon. How do people get in contact with you?
So if people want to connect with me, I think the best way is probably to send me a direct message on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, but LinkedIn is where I generally hang out.
Perfect. So one final message for the audience, please, Matt.
One final message. So I think it comes back to this sense of community. I think that's probably one of the most important things. It's about understanding that you are not alone, and whatever is going on in your life, it's happened to someone else before, and you can reach out and you can speak to other people. It's understanding that by doing that, you're more likely to reach a different outcome, because as I said earlier, you're only one person. You can't see every single angle of what's going on. This could be personally, could be in business. So actually, by reaching out, by communicating, by collaborating, there is much more opportunities. There's much more potential for finding whatever it is that you are looking for, or you're looking to achieve.
Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star iTunes review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, and become a member of the inspiring, uplifting, and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.